Hello again, my frightful nightmares, and welcome back to another Screaming for Horror video. I am Rain, and I hope you're having a fearsome day. The mystifying oracle known as the Ouija board has been a sensation among paranormal enthusiasts and people of all ages up until today. Originally reinvented as a parlor game by the Fult brothers in 1898, they decided to cash in on this spiritualism craze, and the board became an instant phenomenon. The Egyptians, before the birth of the actual board, would use a similar technique to contact their deceased ancestors, which involved a ring suspended by a thread, and then they would hold it over a board with symbols on it. Even though the board has racked up some pretty bad reputation throughout the years, people don't seem to care, and still try to make contact with their loved ones, or so they think, and others simply use it as a novelty game and end up with dire consequences. But be careful what you do, because the board is like a phone. Someone you might not know can answer your call, and that is exactly what happened to the next people in our video. But before we start, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more upcoming creepy and scary content. These are real-life Ouija board stories part 1. Let's begin. Number 1. Impatient. I was about 19 or 20 at the time, I'm 45 now, when a bunch of my buddies and I decided to play with the Ouija one boring night at college. We started to ask the typical questions. What is your name? How did you die? Etc. The board didn't do much at first, so we thought that we were doing something wrong. One of my buddies, a highly impatient individual, started to yell at the board and threw it up against the wall. After that, we told him to chill out, and he pulled to the side while the rest of us kept on playing. Suddenly, he starts laughing like a maniac and starts pulling his hair out. We had to hold him down and slap him around a few times to make him come to. I'll never touch the board ever again. Number 2. The Bell Tower. I'm going to share a story that happened to me nearly 45 years ago. A lot of you might not believe what I've experienced and might think I made it all up due to the degree of the situation and how it might sound like it's right out of a movie. But either way, I know what I saw, and I carry it with me to this day. This happened inside an old church by the name of La Medalla Milagrosa, the Miracle Medallion translated in English, in Tijuana, Mexico. I was a kid at the time, around 6 or 7, but I remember that day very clearly. It was a Bible study Sunday that day with a few other neighborhood kids. We were inside a luncheon room when suddenly a woman came running and screaming at the top of her lungs, pleading for someone to help her and her teenage son, which she was holding on tight, a kid who was no older than 13 or so. The priest at the time didn't understand what was going on. At first, he thought it was some sort of medical emergency, until the woman kept pleading and yelling that her son needed help. The kid then decided to run away from the mom, and he headed towards the main bell tower. As the priest followed him, he reached out for his crucifix and holy water, and he starts to pray. The kid started convulsing on the floor every time the water hit his body. We didn't understand what was going on at the time, so the church caretaker suddenly comes in and takes us with him to his place, which was adjoined to the church, but we were still able to see everything from a small window. I don't know how it got there or where it came from, but out of nowhere, a big black werewolf-looking dog with nasty drool all over him comes in and gets on top of the kid. The priest and his mother were astonished at this happening and momentarily froze. The more the dog kept drooling, the more the kid kept screaming in pain. The drool was landing on top of the kid's body and seemed like it was fizzing acid every time it dropped. We could hear his horrific screams, but we couldn't do anything but watch from afar. Between the mother letting out wails of pain and the priest praying and the dog grunting, I don't even remember how exactly the kid dropped from the bell tower and flopped on the floor down below. He was there, motionless, with a few bones sticking out. The scene was really hard to watch, but I couldn't stop. The dog came down very slowly, and without the slightest worry in the world, the mom and the priest stood there, just numb, watching everything that was unfolding right in front of their eyes. They both knew the dog was in total control of the situation and couldn't do anything about it. The dog approached the body of the kid, licked him all over, picked him up with his big muzzle, and took him away. Even though he was followed by the mother and the priest, they couldn't catch up to him and abruptly disappeared. The mother, in tears and disbelief, told the priest that her son and a few other of his friends were obsessed with the Ouija board. They thought they could ask for favors, money, toys, whatever they wanted, and for what I understood, they did get a response. Only thing is that whoever they reached out, they asked for their souls in return. The kids, thinking it was all a game, they agreed to the terms, and well, those were the consequences. No one knows what happened to the other kids who were there that night either. The town only knew that they had suddenly vanished as well. The mother committed suicide a few days later. She blamed herself for what had happened and couldn't live with it. The priest kept on with his church duties for a few more years, but he will always be remembered as the first priest to ever perform an unauthorized exorcism in that town. Number 3. The Tenant. I moved into a new apartment where the previous tenant had passed away of natural causes. I invited my friends over for dinner, and then we decided to play with it. No one knew the lady's name but me, and that's who we contacted. At first she seemed nice and answered all of our questions, but when my friend asked her, thinking it was me moving the planchette, if she gets laid, it took a turn for the worse. The light started to flicker, some items on the table next to the board flew off, and then, in a low but powerful growl, a "get out" came from out of nowhere. I freaked out and we never played or talked about that night again. Number 4. Derek. When I was 13, I got obsessed with the Ouija board. I didn't even leave it even when I went to sleep. I used to talk to several spirits, but then one day, I met Derek. I've been talking to him day in and day out. He's like the best friend I've never had. Now, I'm 26, and Derek and I are as happy as the first day. He's my soulmate. I love my husband, Derek. Number 5. Aaron. I played a long time ago and talked to the spirit of a guy named Aaron. He was the one that I would talk to the most, and told me that he was going to be my protector and not to be afraid of him. One time I was walking down the street and I was about to cross, when suddenly I felt a push that sent me almost to the other side. I felt a pair of cold hands literally on my back when this happened. If I hadn't been pushed out of the way that day, I would have been hit by a car that came out of nowhere. Until this day, even though I don't play anymore, I still believe that Aaron is with me at all times. Number 6. Say goodbye. A bunch of us gathered at a party one time, and of course, someone took out the board to play. Well, most of us knew how the board worked. You know, the whole be respectful, no cell phone, say goodbye, etc. type of things. Well, it turns out to be that the main person who bought the board didn't know, so she forgot to say goodbye to the board at the end of the session. After that, when the house was almost empty, we started to hear knocking and a baby crying from the basement door. We were all scared but managed to get the courage to go towards the door, and when we got there, nothing, and no one was there. It creeped me out, but she finally learned to say goodbye. Number 7. The Neighbor. I played one time. One time was enough for me. I made the mistake of playing with the board alone, which people told me it was a big no-no, but still, I didn't listen. At first, everything was fine, and nothing happened, until I contacted the spirit of a little girl named Monica. She seemed sweet, so I didn't mind playing with the 14-year-old. One thing led to another, and as I got comfortable, she told me that her neighbor had killed her. Then, things started to turn dark from there. She said that I needed to be careful because my neighbor was going to kill me, that it was going to hurt, and that I was going to suffer, and she told me how much she wanted me to suffer as well as she did. I stopped playing and I never talked to Monica again, and thank goodness I'm fine. To this day, I wonder why she said that to me since she had been so nice up until that point. Number 8. Skeptic. I was having a private gathering with a few acquaintances and the subject of the board came up, and as usual, some of them were believers and some weren't. As the night progressed and we got into the conversation a little bit more, one of them just happened to have a board with them, so we decided to play and make believers out of the skeptic ones. To make a long story short, one of them asked the board that if they were in fact real, to possess her. Big mistake. After the session, she started acting weird and started talking about how she wanted to commit suicide. We convinced her to stay the night and everything went back to normal. I lost touch with most of them a few months after that night, but I did find out that the girl ended up committing suicide about 2 to 3 years later after the incident. Number 9. Siblings. When I was younger and stupid, I went with my friends one night to the cemetery and we decided to play. We started and immediately we made contact with a pair of siblings, a boy named Jason and a girl named Kathy. They explained to us that they had died at a young age and that they were very lonely. They asked us if they could come home with us to keep us company, but no one answered. As much as I felt sorry, it creeped me out, and we all left without saying goodbye. Years passed, and I got married, had kids, and I forgot all about it. Until one day one of my kiddos, I have a set of twins, came running one day to tell me how they had made new imaginary friends. Their names? They happened to be Jason and Kathy. Jason and Kathy told my kids that they knew me. My blood ran cold, and as much as I tried to ignore it, my kids are still playing with them to this day. Number 10. Attached. To this day, I regret the fact that my friends convinced me to play that fateful night. Something came through, and it has been with me ever since. I know it's something demonic. I cannot explain it, and people don't believe me, but I see it all the time. In my dreams, in the shower, and even when I'm walking around in a crowded place. I see its face wherever I turn. So if you decide to play, make sure that's what you want, because someone can attach themselves to you and never ever leave. Number 11. My friend. About 3 years ago, I had a dream about a friend passing away. A friend whom I had lost touch with for a while. I ended up finding out that she did pass away, so I thought it was a sign, and I decided to use my board. I don't use it much, but I have it in storage just to contact her. As I made contact with her, she told me a few things, and basically what she wanted was to say goodbye, and for me to let her family know not to worry and that she was okay. As I was about to say goodbye, she told me that the man I was about to marry was no good for me, and that was all. I decided to follow her advice and looked into my fiancé a little deeper. Turns out to be that he was wanted in Canada for multiple crimes. I thank my friend every day for that, and now I'm happily married to a wonderful guy. I wouldn't have met him without her advice. Number 12. The movie theater. I started working at a small old movie theater when I was younger. I wanted to earn extra money and meet new friends, so I did. It was all fine at first, but weird things would happen, especially at night. We would find trash in the seating areas we had just cleaned. The soda machines would suddenly start dispensing on their own, among other unexplainable things. When I started asking around about the incidents, the staff, which included some of the new friends I had just met, told me that the movie theater was haunted. I thought they were trying to prank me at first, but as time passed by, I started seeing more and more weird stuff. One particular Monday night, it was about 5 or 6 of us, and we were just hanging out in the back area, keeping an eye out for potential customers, but it was dead. It was so dead we decided to phone the manager and told him about it. He gave us the okay to close down earlier than usual, and just to put a sign at the door, it was about an hour before closing time anyways. We decided to hang back for a bit after we were done with everything, when one of the guys that I would call Josh pulled out an old Ouija board and asked if we wanted to play. I had heard about them but never played. I was too chicken shit to admit it, but I couldn't say no and be a geek in front of my new so-called friends, so I stupidly said, hell yeah, I'm all up for it. The rest of us, we were all on board as well, so we decided we wanted to find out who was doing all those things at the theater and why. At first, just like a lot of people, we started to joke around, etc. Then, things started to get serious when we asked who was there. The board answered us with 8 different names. The lights started to flicker, and we started seeing shadows out of the corner of our eyes. We all started freaking out, especially when the board started going around on its own, making an 8 in the middle of the board over and over and over. Josh mentioned that it was a bad sign, and we decided to stop. We all left our separate ways, freaked out, but nobody mentioned anything about it. I headed to the bathroom before leaving. I went in, did my business, and came out to wash my hands. I looked in the mirror, and as the stall behind me slowly opened up, I saw a woman weeping inside. I knew for a fact the theater was closed and that it was none of the other girls. I darted as fast as I could out of there, making my way out towards the back, into the parking lot, trying to reach my car. I couldn't get there fast enough. I felt like my shoes were filled with cement, and like an eternity until I reached it. I got into my car and I drove out of there like a bat out of hell. When I turned back to look if anyone was behind me, she was standing right outside the exit door. I quit through the phone the following day and never went back. Well, frightful bunch, that's all we have for you today, but stay tuned for more parts to come. If you have a ghostly experience, a close encounter, or want to share any photos or videos of strange phenomena, feel free to send us an email at screamingforhorror@gmail.com, and your story could be featured in one of our future videos. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Subscribe and follow us on our Facebook and TikTok pages for more. And if you're on the go, you can also find us on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcast. And remember, until next time, this is Rain. Sweet screams.